August 2nd, 2019. I'm Emily Kelly, and I'm interviewing Scott Dutton at the Newkirk Public Library, Newkirk, Oklahoma. I'm a member of the Newkirk 4-H Go-Getters, and this is for the Oklahoma Military Hall of Fame project. So, what motivated you to join the military?
In the era that I grew up, everybody was going to serve in the military, pretty much everybody. And from the time I was 12, I decided that I wanted to do my service in the Navy. So I kind of planned that as soon as I graduated from high school, I would go in the Navy, do my service, and then come out and find some kind of career, rather than starting something and then being interrupted. I knew I wasn't going to go to college. So,
do you want to tell me a little bit about your time in basic training?
Basic training in the Navy is very different than the other branches of service. We had physical training, some, but we spent a great deal of time in the classroom, learning procedures and how things about the ships and how they operate, and how you can find your way around on a ship, the numbering system for the decks and compartments, and rules about how to move about a ship in an emergency and so on. And we had written tests that we had to take, and if you didn't pass the written test, then you'd get held back. So it was as much mental, if not more, than physical.
What was your primary job after training?
I was assigned to the after engine room on the USS John R. Pierce, DD 753. After boot camp, I was not given a school. I was just sent straight to the ship. And I was assigned to the after engine room, and I stayed in that engine room the whole 4 years. My job was designated as a machinist mate, and our primary function was main engines for the ship, but we had a whole raft of, we had HP and LP air compressors. We had evaporators which turned seawater into fresh water. We had laundry equipment, galley equipment, air conditioning, refrigeration, hydraulics, steering, N2O2 plants. I mean, we had a very wide range of equipment that we had to know in order to pass our exam to advance in rank.
Where were you deployed?
Well, as I said, I was stationed aboard USS John R. Pierce, DD 753. It was home ported in Brooklyn, New York City. We were the Navy in New York City. We tied up in the old Brooklyn Navy Yard, and our primary function was for training reservists. And reserves would come aboard the ship on Sunday, and we would get underway on Monday. And then Friday we would pull into some place where they could have an enjoyable time for the weekend and want to stay in the reserves. And then Monday we would get back underway, and Friday we would pull back into New York. Saturday they would disembark. And in that period of time I went to as far north as Halifax, Nova Scotia twice. Went to Newport, Rhode Island, I don't know how many times, a bunch. Norfolk, Virginia. Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We went to Fort Lauderdale at Easter time one year. Miami, Florida twice. Key West, Florida twice. Freeport, Bahamas once, and Nassau 6 times.
Where did you serve the majority of your time?
After engine room, the USS John R. Pierce.
So, what rank are you most proud of to have earned?
I made E6, which is first class petty officer. And as I said, when I went aboard the ship, I had no schooling at all. They just put me in that engine room, and I was E2, and I made it to E6. When I left the ship, I was petty officer in charge of the engine room. Had 7 men who worked under me, and every one of them was older than I was.
Which medals or citations are you most honored to have received?
I received only one medal, which was National Defense Medal, but I did receive 2 other citations, or an award and a citation. I got a letter of commendation from the captain of the ship, which is on the wall in my office still to this day, and I received what's called a Pierceman Award, and it was an award that was given not on a regular basis, but just when the captain felt somebody had earned it. And so in the 4 years, there were 2 men that received that award, and I was one of them.
Do you have any special people that you met?
Yes, I do. One of the people that worked in the engine room I did when I first got aboard ship, I didn't like at all. And wound up being an extremely close friend. And his name was Steve Krusevich. And he got married, and I became really good friends with his wife also. And I used to go over to their apartment in Brooklyn and spend the night. I had a key to their apartment. I'd come and go as I pleased. Never said when I was coming. I'd just show up, and they moved to Wisconsin eventually. We went to Wisconsin to visit them. We lived in Illinois. They came to visit us. My oldest daughter, we were living in Louisiana when she got married, but she got married in Illinois, and they came down for the wedding. In 2008, Steve passed away, and he had asked me to speak at his funeral. It was in the winter, and there was a blizzard, and there was no way I could get there. And so I sat in front of a video camera and did a funeral sermon, and we FedExed it overnight to the funeral home, and it got there 5 minutes before the funeral was to start. And they played it, and Sharon told me that everybody's asking, who is this guy? We've never heard of him, but he sure knew Steve. And I still talk to Sharon once a year. We call each other at Christmas, and it's the best friend I ever made in the military.
Did you have any favorite foods from the military?
Well, probably the worst food I've ever eaten in my life was in the military, and also some of the best. The cooks on the ship that I was on were mediocre at best. And at one of our tender periods, they were working on our mess decks, so they had them closed down. We had to go to the tender to eat. We thought we were going to a 5-star restaurant when we got there. It was fabulous. I mean, selection was great. It was just, and well prepared. It broke our hearts when we finished our mess decks and we had to eat it on our own ship.
Do you have any funny stories that could only happen in the military?
Well, yeah. As I said, we were a reserve training ship, but a lot of times we would move the ship without any reservist on board, and the crew was designed to be around 275 to 300 men, and counting officers, we had 125 people. And when we moved the ship without reserves aboard, we would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to light off the plant to get it started so that we could get underway at 8 o'clock. And it was in the engine room, we got up and at 4 o'clock in the morning, got everything going. But there was no relief for the watch. In other words, we were there from the time we started till the time we tied up. And I didn't even get to go eat that day. They just brought me something from the mess decks, a sandwich. And it was 8 o'clock at night, and we're still running drills. Every time we would get underway, we would run drills for what you do in case of an emergency. Okay. It's 8 o'clock at night. I'm beat, and the phone talker said high water, #1 boiler, and which means that water could come through the steam lines and hit the generator, and at that speed, the generator would explode. So when you have high water, there's a emergency trip on the generator. You hit it with your fist, and the valve slams shut that quick. The only problem was we were in the after engine room, and #1 boiler was feeding the generator in the main engine room, and they tripped their generator too. So when we tripped our generator, we turned out the lights on the whole ship. We're out here with no lights, period. And about the time that valve slammed shut, one guy said, "Dutton, that was #1 boiler." I go, "Light the generator off." But you can't just light the generator off. You got to get it up to speed and everything. Then you got to have an electrician come down and get it in phase where you can go back online. And then meanwhile, they got diesel generators that come on, but all the sonar men and the radio men are trying to shut down their equipment because the surge coming back on can blow their equipment up. And so anyhow, the chief hit the engine room, said, "What happened?" I said, "Chief, it was my fault. All I heard was high water. I had tripped the generator." "It's okay." Turn and hit the ladder. Went back out. Next thing we know, they passed the word secure from casualty control drills. We went into the pier and tied up.
How did your military experience affect your life today?
It affects everything. Responsibility, owning up for your mistakes. In the military, one of the worst things you can do is try to blame something you did on somebody else. You did it, you own it. But by the same token, if you didn't do it, it's not your problem. It belongs to somebody else. And so I'm not saying you watch out just for yourself, because an entire ship, you put an infantryman out in the field with a rifle and he's responsible for shooting that rifle. Everybody on the ship's responsible for getting that ship to the point where the guns can fire. And everybody has to work as a team. Everybody has to do their job or it doesn't happen. And when there's an emergency, it's even worse. Because if you're assigned to a damage control party, you have to know your job. You have to know what you do and where you go. There's an alarm on the ship called a general alarm. When it goes off, you don't even have to know what the problem is. You know where your station is when that alarm goes off, and you do everything you can to get there as rapidly as possible.
Have you kept in contact with anyone with whom you served?
Yeah, I already told you a story about Steve, and I have a friend in Florida that I quasi stay in contact with. And over the years, I have had contact with, intermittently, with some of the other men that I served with. And I'd really like to look up some more of them. I try every once in a while, and so far don't get much.
Do you have any other stories you'd like to share?
There's just not enough time. What's fun is to sit down with a bunch of veterans, and one story keys another, and veterans can sit there and talk for hours and hours and hours. And there's something about, it doesn't matter what branch of service they were in, there is still a shared experience that nobody else understands. I mean, you can be told about it, but until you've really experienced it, you can't understand it. My youngest daughter wrote me a letter one time. And my children used to get upset with me. We'd go to a football game, they'd play the national anthem. I made them stand still, stand up straight. Shortly after she graduated high school, one of her classmates was deployed and killed in action. She apologized. She said, I never understood what it meant. Every man, woman who puts on a uniform agrees to go where they're sent and do what they can, up to and including giving their life so that people at home can be free.